Hey, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of The Modern Squid, where we get to know the people behind our favorite writers and brands. On this week's episode, we have Yun Long Young, and he has a really interesting story about his travels. Without further ado, here we go. All right, so let's start with the baseline question. On that scale of full squid to full atgat, where would you say you fall?
I would say most of the time, I'm all the gear all the time. And I would say that when I'm in the US, that's pretty true. But when I went to do my big trip, when I stayed in like Colombia for a long time, there was quite a few days I went out without jackets or even protective wear for pants, just because one, it's miserably humidly hot, and I would never leave without the helmet. But also, like if you're just going down the street to get food, because that's like my only transportation, and I'm staying in the same place. Like I am not going to load up all my gear to do 5 miles and then come back 5 miles and then take everything off, and then so there's a there's a bit of that. So there was a lot of riding where it was just helmet and nothing else when I was on my trip. But generally, when I leave the house here, it's always with full gear.
Okay. So I was reading through your blog, and it seemed like you had mentioned that you've dropped the bike a number of times, especially on the trip. Now, I assume that all the times that you dropped the bike, you were wearing your gear. So do you feel like it helped?
Yes. So the big crash I had was in Alaska. That was. I mean, I had a bunch of crashes over the years. I mean, like the saying goes, it's not when you're going to, if you're going to, but when you're going to crash. So there's different times. I think I've crashed a lot more riding off road than I have, on the road. Once I got over like the learning curve after a few years, like the on the road crashes are kind of, not very frequent. If not, I don't remember the last time I had a spill on the road. But riding off road, you go on rocky terrain, you often dump your bike, and it's not really the same thing because you're not going nearly as fast. But the gears definitely helped. The boots definitely help, and I would say like the bottom half helps a lot more than the top half. Like your knee and your hip when you drop your bike, and then like potentially your bike land on your leg, or like some awkward position when you hit your hip on a rock when you come off of it. Like the bottom half definitely a lot more than the top half for me. So
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, a lot of people forego real riding boots. And when I was in my MSF class, the guy was trying to convince everyone to make sure that they got real riding boots because he's like, not only could it squish your foot, but it can get burned too. So make sure you've
yes.
got something between your foot and all the hot parts in case you drop it, because it might take you a second to get it off you.
Yeah, especially on cruisers where the exhaust pipe kind of sits kind of right where your leg is. And a lot of models, kind of the exhaust sitting right there. Especially Harleys, they're like right there on your leg. And if you like dropped it and it leans on you, then the pipe is literally just crushing against your leg and then you get it out of there. So yeah.
I have a Harley, so I know exactly what you mean. I haven't
Yeah.
dropped it on myself yet, but I have dropped it. And funny enough, it was in gravel. I was in like a little park, and everything was paved, and they had some like really good signage. It seemed very family friendly,
hmm
like you're not really out in the wilderness. And there was a little turnoff, and I don't remember what the site was, but there was like a little sightseeing area over there. And when you first turn off, the gravel was super hard packed and just looked like a hard road. So I slowed down thinking, I'll just take it a little bit easy. Well, 10 feet in, the gravel gets super loose. It's like 6 inches deep, and I have no off-road experience. So I'm trying to slow it down and turn. And as soon as I started turning a little bit, the bike just like dropped. And luckily I was able to get out of the way and pick it up later. But yeah, gravel, man, gravel's my nemesis.
especially on like on cruisers, like your tire is probably not like for any kind of like gravel road. And yeah.
No
So
knobbies.
no.
I saw your tire, by the way. um, on your blog when you finally replaced it, and I'm shocked that you could write on it
Oh, it
with
was
how
terrible.
worn that you made that thing. That was crazy.
That was terrible. And it was and then I swapped the when I that was so I was swapping that when I was in Canada, and then they didn't have any tires, so like the host that hosted me, he's a big motorcycle guy, so he actually teaches like the motorcycle course up there, and he got me a tire, and he got like a super knobby off-road tire for me, and it was okay. I mean, it was the only tire they had. So then I slapped this thing on. Didn't know that when I got to Oregon, when I'm coming down from Idaho going towards Oregon, the winds were so bad, and I'm on like this tiny knobby like contact patch, and I'm just like sliding over the road. Oh my god! I thought I was gonna crash every like 5 seconds because
Holy
I'm just
moly.
like 5 feet over, 5 feet back, and then the wind just blows you, and you're just like, I feel so unstable because it's so bad.
So let's back up for a second because I haven't mentioned, I don't think you've mentioned either, but you actually took a trip from Alaska all the way down to Argentina. Was that right?
Actually, DC all the way up to Alaska, all the way down to Argentina.
Now, did you come back up the East Coast as you were coming back, or how did?
No, I didn't come back. I came all the way up to Buenos Aires, and then I flew back and shipped it back.
Okay, still, that's
Yeah.
a long ride.
Yeah.
Now, was it 2016 that you did that, or how far back was it?
That was no, that was it was 2 years already? Yeah, 2 years ago.
Okay, it's 2018.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
wow. So how long did the whole trip take overall?
About 9 months and a little more.
Holy moly.
Yeah. I think by in the mid of 8 months or so, I started wanting to come home. But the second I got home and like tidy up my bike, I was like, I'm ready to leave again.
Yeah, I hear that, I've never done it myself, but I don't know if you've heard of Teapot One. He's a British motovlogger, and he did, I don't remember if it was like an Africa tour or around the world tour or something, but he said the same thing where he was like kind of anxious to get home. But then as soon as he got home, he was just like, I want to get back out,
Yeah. For the most of the issue is you can't like by then my bike was really tired, and I know that I haven't really taken care of it, and there's really difficult to take care of it on the road for certain things, and it's really also difficult to get parts and get like replacement parts quickly and properly, and then like things that have been damaged, like I want to replace, I couldn't do. Like I ended up with a decent sized chunk missing from my swing arm because the chain got loose, and I had my girlfriend on the back. I met her in Colombia, and I picked her up, and then we rode down to Argentina. But I didn't know that the extra weight, as long as her luggage, like really sagged the chain and it stretched it out really fast. And well, the chain got really loose, and it would start slapping the swing arm, and then it wore away all the protector rubber piece. And I can't buy another rubber piece anywhere near. So I ended up just buying like the quick like paste epoxy, and every night I would put it over it, like fill the hole up, and then by the end of the next day it would be completely gone. I buy another stick and I fill it all up, and the next day I roll again with it. And I did that from all the way. Actually, I've discovered that like midway down Argentina, and I did that all the way down to Ushuaia and then back to Buenos Aires before I got I got another chain in one of the towns going up to it, but it was really sketchy.
You know what we call that, right? We call that backyard mechanic stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was as backyard as it gets, man. It was about as shady as it gets. Shade tree mechanic as it is.
That's great. But I mean, it sounds like it was a lot of fun. So, and you got a great story. You know what I mean? Like, that's one of the benefits of taking trips, I think, is like you come back and you got these stories you can tell people.
Interesting enough, I find it very difficult when I came back telling people these stories like people just don't are not able to relate unless you've ridden trips like that yourself, or like in certain capacity that you did maybe like a cross country trip or had a went a certain amount of mileage. Like there's such a huge disconnect from understanding the depth and the length, and it's just like I tell people, oh, I rode from here to Alaska down to Argentina. They're like, oh, okay, cool. And then later on, I'll talk to them again. They're like, what? You did what? Like they just didn't really understand it at first. And then they also didn't, I almost want to say, didn't know where the geography of these things are. Like just by, passing by saying, oh, I went from here to here. Like they're not really like, oh, okay, whatever. But they don't really comprehend where they are. And then if you really think about it, it's like, and then I find that people have a difficult time, like, sharing these things with people. I find that people, cannot really relate unless you've done it yourself, or at least in similar trips or something.
Sure. Well, and I think that a lot of people, I hate to say it, but a lot of people listen to talk, just wait for a chance to talk versus want to really hear someone else's experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things I like about podcasting is I really do like to hear people's experiences. And so I can get in touch with people who I think are going to have an interesting story, and really get a chance to go deep. And when I share it with people, the people who are going to listen are going to be people who also care about that kind of stuff. And it's one of the things that appeals to me about this, because if you're not interested, you don't have to listen. There's no waiting to talk because you can't talk back to the podcast.
True.
So it's weird because electronically you would think that there's less of a connection, but there's almost more deep of a connection doing it this way, because you're reaching people who actually care.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
No,
but, now, want to tell everyone why you decided to do the trip?
I don't know. I just kind of like decided that I did 8 years as a school counselor. I was in a leadership position in my school. I had my own counseling department that I supervise over a few counselors. And I've been doing that for 4 years at that time. And I'm like, okay, I can do the work. I'm pretty decent at it. Man, I'm bored. And I looked at my contract with my county, because I'm tenured already. I looked at my contract. It's like, oh, you can request for a 1-year sabbatical every 4 years in the county.
Wow.
So I was like, so that means I come back, I'll still have my job. Yes. Where do I sign? And of course, there's always this issue, because I've taken a lot of trips. One of the earlier trip is the cross country trip on that bike, actually, on the yellow BMW R1100S. So that's one of my first cross country trips, and that was a 3-week ordeal. And the only reason I was able to do that is because I didn't camp anywhere. So of course that cost is significantly higher when you have to motel it or hotel it across the country. But also it gives you a lot more ride time, because you don't, and your bike's a lot lighter and you get a lot more ride time because you're not cooking anything. You get there, you order food, and then you go on. And that trip cost me, I think, just shy of $3,000 to do 21 days.
It's not that bad. I mean, that's like, what you'd spend if you went to Europe just on plane tickets and like a couple days of hotel, so.
Right, exactly. But it is really like, that's the only way you can travel if you only have like 2 to 3 weeks a year. And I always feel like, man, I wish I could go further, because every time you want to turn around, it's this sadness when you go out riding and you have to turn around, whether it's for work or whether it's end of the day or a day ride. It's just like, gotta ride home now, and I don't know if you feel that way. I don't know that, but I always get that like, oh, man, I gotta turn around now. Now the sun is in a different position. It's kind of depressing. But I just want to keep riding. I just want to keep going. And doing a whole, like basically a year off and having all the time in the world to do this trip, like it gives you a lot of flexibility. You can camp and you can cook, and it gives you a lot of ability to do just wild camping. And my monthly budget was 1,500, but if I take away all the shipping costs for the motorbikes and like permitting and whatnot, monthly cost is like less than $1,000, even at the pace I was going at. Like it was like next to nothing, you know. And if I travel even slower, then that cost would be down even further, because now you have less fuel and, you know, less wear and tear, less like oil changes and whatnot. Like the slower you travel, the less cost it costs for me. So, but you know, that was one of the main two of the main reasons that I have the ability to do it. And then of course the secondary reason is, you know, I always wanted to do a long trip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now your website, I think it's called breakthecycle.com or something.
Mm-hmm. Break the Cycles.
Break the Cycles. Thank you.
Yes.
Where did you come up with that name?
A friend of mine, we were talking about it, about what, this was like so many years ago. It was kind of like we were having a conversation, and this friend of mine was like into marketing. She's in marketing industry. And she's like, oh, you could do Break the Cycles. And at that time I was like, yeah, whatever, who cares? And I was like, yeah, it's catchy, but who cares? But later on, I kind of found the directions for kind of like my motivation to help other people realize that they can change what they want to, just do what they want to do and change their cards, as if you will. Like they can do whatever they wish to do, and the world is out there, as long as they have to break the cycles of what they're doing right now. So I was like, oh, hey, I remember that one thing that my one friend told me. That's great. Let me use that. So then that become my handle, Break the Cycle. And then I couldn't get Break the Cycle because apparently everybody used that. So I ended up using Break the Cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, does that website get updated every time you go on a trip? It looked like there were multiple trips in there when I was checking it out. Is it still something you plan on continuing to update, or are you kind of?
Yeah. So currently the update is, so I haven't really gone through all my travel stuff yet from the whole year. There is I would say there is a bit of fear of me editing the content for my Alaska to Argentina trip, because I feel like I'm gonna get really depressed.
Because you miss it, right?
Yes, no. And I look at the photo and I'm like, oh man, come on, get me out of here. Right? And so there's that. But I've changed the site up, the format of the site up a little bit. So I work at my brother's shop. He has an automotive shop in the front. I work on bikes for him in the front of the shop as a second job for, during the COVID time, because my schools are all closed, so I have a lot of time on my hands. So I was working on people's bikes, and I also restored a SV650, 2007, and now I'm currently finished building my 1978 BMW R80/7, fully custom. Everything's I did it myself, with some help from welding from some friends and like painting from the shop, but everything else I'm doing myself. So that kind of is like the thing that I will update recently about like the build and like where it's going. And sometime in the near future, I will finish updating my round the world trip, and yeah, any other trip I make, I typically do some photography, some videography with the drone. Um, and I find that to be more, I don't know, I find that to be more fulfilling for the trip, and you can look back and have all these content and be able to relive the moments, which is ironic because I'm kind of like terrified of looking at reliving the moments right now.
Yeah. I love photos. And so I really enjoyed looking through the pictures that were on your site as well as reading through what you'd written. And when I got to the end, I thought there'd be another page and I was like, did I miss it? Where's the rest? And so I'm excited for you to update it, even if you're a little bit nervous about, getting depressed looking at all the photos and such.
But I have so much content, and I actually lost a lot of content. And good thing that I post most of the content up on Facebook and Instagram along the way. But I got my phone stolen when I was in Colombia.
Oh,
and because the internet is kind of very spotty when you're traveling, and especially you go into these really small towns, the internet is just, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's non-existent, but it's not very stable. So like I actually turned off my iCloud update because it was crashing all the time. And then I lost my phone and then nothing was updated. And I was so blown. That was so painful. I mean, granted, I have photos from my own memory, but the things that you upload, the quality is just so much less than what the original photo,
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that was rough. That was a tough break. Maybe I'll just do it again and then take new photos.
There you go. Yeah.
So,
This time you got to have like one phone that you actually use and then one bait phone.
oh, I do. I had two phones.
Oh, really? You had one like specifically for someone to steal?
No, it was my burner phone for data. So I had a Google Fi plan on a cheap phone. So I figured I'll use that phone on a regular basis when I'm past the border. And then my iPhone at the time was like my main point and shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And I was using it as a point and shoot, and somebody swiped it.
Oh, what, it was in your hand?
No. It was in my pocket, zipped up, but they came by and then unzipped it and pulled it. I was in a salsa festival, and I saw the guy, but then they disappeared in the crowd. There's no way you'll catch them. And then if you try to run after them, there's not only going to be one, and they may trip you. They might do something to you and whatnot. So, like, it's just unless you grab them while they're grabbing your stuff, you're kind of, you're out of luck.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and that kind of sucked. But a good thing that I had the drone footage, I had the GoPro footages, and I also have camera footages. My girlfriend has a DSLR, so I still had a ton of other resources, and I lost only the stuff on my phone, but that was a majority of the quick point and shoot, and I got some amazing photos even with that, even with that camera. So it was kind of disappointing.
Oh, me too now.
Yeah. There was the worst one that I wanted so bad was the video of the I have it on my YouTube, one of the videos I uploaded, but I was on the Stallred. So for the listener that don't know what Stallred is, Stallred is one of the main ship that takes you from Panama to Colombia. It's a sailboat. So then there's also another company, but Stallred is one of the most popular ones. So when I was on the Stallred, it was one morning that we woke up and the boat's moving like relatively slowly, and there was just dolphins swimming with the boat. There was a school of them all next to the boat swimming, and I was like taking videos of that, and I used it in one of my videos, but
Wow.
It's gone now. I can't use that for anything else. It's gone. It's only in that video, and that's it.
So as you were going, from Alaska through Central America into South America, uh, how was the crime? And the reason I ask is that I have a couple buddies who live part time in Nicaragua. One of them basically lives there full time. He just goes to Costa Rica when his visa's up for a few days and comes back in. But anyway, my one buddy who lives there most of the time was considering coming back to the U.S. and buying like a KTM and then riding it back down to Nicaragua. But all of the people that who were kind of expats and who lived down in Nicaragua who were American were telling him not to do it because it's just so dangerous to drive a motorcycle through Central America. But then I'm hearing your story, and besides having your phone stolen, you've yet to say anything negative about Central America. And
Central
Colombia is
America,
South America, I know, but
yeah, Central America is, I don't know. I think the situation will differ, and you have to. So when I got down into Mexico, so I pretty much travel almost predominantly solo through through Canada and Alaska, and then I rode with some few buddies like that I met on the road for a couple weeks, but predominantly solo riding the entire way. And then when I got down to Mexico, I hooked up with a bunch of guys from Colorado, and we just met on Instagram. And then when I got down to southern Mexico, I met up with another buddy of mine that I met who bought my other DR before I left, and we were riding together. And then another friend of ours joins. And every time we crossed the border or near the border, we made sure that we were together so that we can keep an eye on each other's stuff when we're crossing the border. And that's very important. I think there are certain things to be cautious about. And interesting enough, I have other friends that have went after me, and they had very, very different stories than I did. Like they got into a lot of hassle with the police or people extorting them and stuff. I didn't get any of that. Like, didn't have really any issues other than getting my phone stolen. And I think one time in Peru, one cop like pulled us over because my headlight blew out, and then he tried to extort some money from me. And then he was like, "Oh, it's gonna cost X, Y, Z." We're like, "Yeah, give me a break, get out of here." And then we ended up getting him like $20, and then like went on our way. But like we were in a really bad location, and he knew that it was in a really bad location, and he knew that it was getting dark. So I either pay him or, nonsense with him for a long time, and I end up, putting myself in a dangerous position. But most of the time, if you ride the back roads, like it's not really that big of a deal. The one time that I got harassed by cop is when I came back out on the Pan American Highway. Mm-hmm. I typically don't ride the highway. It's always on the back roads. So like you barely see anybody anyways. Southern Mexico was really extreme poverty, and it's kind of sketchy. Just because all the villagers out on the road with machetes, and then they block the road off, and you have to give them $1 or $2 to pass, and then you go on the toll roads, and they take over the toll roads, and then you have to pay them the toll to pass. So it's kind of like, it's all a bit of it's all a bit of silliness. But I didn't really run into any issues at all. No real issues, at least. And I know that's like not everybody's story. There's a few hot spots where people say don't go, and you just look it up online before you head out. And I didn't really plan like anything more than like 3-4 days in advance of where I'm going to be. So like every 3-4 days you take a look at where you're going to go, and then that's it. It's not like you have this whole thing mapped out and like, oh, I'm going to go this spot. And no, you just like you wing it, and then you just like there you're like, okay, maybe I'll go here and I'll go there, and I'll just you just wing it. And if you're riding with somebody and they want to go somewhere and you've never been there, you're like, okay, let's go check it out. So yeah. Wow. Nicaragua was actually one of my favorites.
I love Nicaragua.
Yeah, absolutely one of my favorites. Have you been to Volcan Telica?
No, but I did go to. I saw that you were Leon.
Huh?
You're in Leon?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. I love Leon. We went to Granada.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we didn't get to Ometepe. I would have liked to have gone, but that would have been fun. But what's the place that you enjoyed that you're asking me about?
Volcan Telica is a volcano.
It's
It's an
different from
active
Ometepe
volcano.
then?
Huh?
Is it different from Ometepe then?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
It's back roads, 100%. You got deep ruts, sand, gravel, mud, all the way to the top, like 35, 40 miles. I rode for like 6 hours. I got there like at like 10 o'clock at night. It was so bad. And there's a bat cave up there. I had a video uploaded on Facebook, but it literally is like Batman's cave. Like there's like 10,000 bats fly out all over the place. And the volcano is, you walk up the side of the volcano. There's nothing. Like there's no protection, nothing. You just walk straight up to it and you can walk straight up to the side of it. It was the most exhilarating experience ever. But the road going up was terribly rough. And many times in many locations, they were single track. And then you have like a little bit get wider, and then you have like cars coming down the other way, like small cars. And then like, you're trying to squeeze by, and like, oh my goodness, it was a hot mess.
Oh,
it was a real
understand.
hot mess.
Yeah.
But it was one of the best rides ever. One of the best. Yeah. One of the best rides and one of the best experiences. Just because it's so raw and it's so untouched. Because even when you go to a lot of these places, you could just hit the tourist attractions. And I find that when you hit the tourist attraction, one, it gets really expensive really quickly. And two, like, they have a lot of rules at these tourist attractions, right? So we went to Volcan Telica. We just, sent our drones up. I mean, so you're not supposed to, but there's nobody around for like miles and miles.
Yeah.
So like all these silly rules of like, but it's all for making money. They tell you, you got to pay like $500 to have to record stuff or something. It's just,
oh wow.
Yeah, it's silliness. I mean, it was the same thing in Guatemala too at Simuk Champagne. Beautiful place, but it's a little bit, it's a little bit silly. But a lot of the back road stuff and like places that people haven't been to, it's very undeveloped, but the experience is extraordinary because you can't get that with the more touristy. Because I went to another volcano. Let me see if I can't find this real quick. But I went to another volcano afterwards, and it was not. It was commercialized, so there was no. Let me see which one that was. It was the popular one.
If it's in the if it's on like an island, then that's Ometepe.
I think it was Managua. Was there one there? It was one of the big ones.
Yeah, so I mean, the most popular one out there is Ometepe, and it's the most touristy one. I think it's got water around it and stuff, and it's just super, super popular for people to go to.
Yeah, I don't remember. It's been 2 years.
yeah. I was just there in November, so that's the only reason I remember that particular volcano. But yeah, I was staying in Esteli, which is kind of small. It's really just like a cigar town. So the whole thing revolves around the cigar industry, basically. And the only people who go there who are American are pretty much in the cigar industry, and it's not like a lot of places I've traveled before where a significant number of people speak English. Like everyone out there is just like, half of them have never seen an American before, probably.
Yeah. And it is a lot cheaper in Nicaragua, especially with the travel ban that the U.S. put on them a while back. It really really kind of wrecked their tourism business.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a really nice place. It's one of the ones I enjoy the most. I find Costa Rica and like down in Panama become more and more U.S. like, and the prices reflect.
Well, exactly. So it's funny you say that. I was just talking to my girlfriend about we're always kind of talking about different things, and she wants to leave Arizona, and she'd love to leave the U.S. and kind of go live somewhere else. And I was showing her my buddy's Instagram post where he was like, fully furnished apartment, ocean view, $700 a month, and it's like 3 or 4 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms or something like that. And I was kind of showing her that, and I told her previously how cheap Nicaragua was. I mean, people talk about Costa Rica being so beautiful and everything, and I've never been to Costa Rica personally, but a lot of my friends who I was hanging out with in Nicaragua were like, "Don't go to Costa Rica. Nicaragua is just as beautiful and like 10 times cheaper." You
Yep,
know, and
100%.
anyway, I was reading an article probably 5-10 years ago about people retiring, U.S. folks retiring overseas. And even back then, they were saying Panama and Costa Rica were getting too touristy. And it used to be a really great place for Americans to retire and do so cheaply and safely. And then they're like, it's getting there's too many Americans now. There's too much money flowing and it's getting more and more expensive. And at this point, it's not really worth it unless you just want to live somewhere else. It's not really worth it to go down there for.
No, Panama's very expensive.
Yeah.
Panama's very expensive, and people know that you have money,
Mm-hmm.
and they know you're American. So Costa Rica's on the way there. We had some friends that's from there, and then we visited them, and yeah, it's getting really expensive over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least when I went through, it was not. It was one of the more expensive South American countries. Nothing's going to beat Chile though, but everything else,
Chile is that expensive?
Oh my goodness, Chile is probably more expensive than the U.S.
Why?
It's very, very well, like in the cities and stuff. It's very, very, very well manicured, and it's very, very developed. They have like in Santiago, they have like all the American stores. They have Lush, they have all these like big box stores, and the city streets are super clean, like spotless, and they have like fantastic like street graffiti art under underpath, walking underpath and stuff. It's very, very well manicured city in the good parts at least. There's some not as good parts like all big cities, but in the majority of the parts of the city, the infrastructure is well developed. The roads are clean. It's nice, and I believe Chileans don't need visa to come to the U.S.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very, very expensive and it's very developed. So if you can survive down there and you're doing well down there, there's no reason why you're trying to come to the U.S., I guess.
So let me ask you, do you know what their industry is out there? Is it produce? Is it wool, meat? Like what do they produce?
I actually don't know.
I'll have to look it up. I'm curious now.
They have I know that when I rode through, at least in the northern areas where the Atacama Desert is, there's a lot of mining. So they have tons of mining because I camped out in a lot of like abandoned, coal mine areas. And like, it's just a whole entire strip coming up and down from the desert area. It's just all mining places that they've mined and like abandoned. And then you just kind of duck into the ditch in the back and then set up your tent. Nobody will know you're there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Nicaragua was one of your favorite places. If you had to pick one as the absolute favorite country, which country would you say is the best?
It's going to be a toss up between Colombia and Peru.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can definitely like live and like enjoy Colombia if I was to stay there. But I would say that Peru's like the roads in Peru and the motorcycling in Peru it's hard to beat.
Yeah.
Like the mountains and then the riding in the mountain is really hard to beat. you're not going to get the same kind of you're not going to get the same kind of riding in Colombia. Just that the whole Andes mountain range in Peru is absolutely gorgeous, absolutely phenomenal. But Colombia has better, beaches, ocean, like ocean fronts. Like they're much more cleaner than Peru. Like Peru is one of the dirtiest places I've ever been. Like you come down the Pan American Highway, you see trash is flying across the freeway, like nonstop.
Wow.
Like people just throw trash everywhere, and then you get to like the ocean side, it's just littered with trash. Like, and their cities are super dirty, super dirty. And there's like this. It's really weird because when you get to like Cusco, where that's basically like the entry point to buy the tickets for Machu Picchu. It's like the town before you go to Machu Picchu.
Mm-hmm.
The big town that you stock everything up and then you go right to Machu Picchu. You cross a certain line where the U.S. embassy is, and on the other side, and it's like clean, manicured. And then you go to the other side of that line, it's like super dirty. It's like the storefront wall is like dirty, and then you go to the other side, it's like super clean, as if though you enter like a tourist area, which you did. You enter like a tourist portal, and everything is nice and clean, and like, as you would feel. I would say you would feel comfortable as though you came to like a developed city area where it's like well manicured, and the contrast is quite interesting.
I think obviously I've not been there, but my girlfriend's from Juarez. She's from Mexico, and it's something somewhat similar, at least in my mind. I'm imagining it's similar to when you're in El Paso and then you cross over into Juarez. On one side, El Paso is not a super clean city, but it's pretty modern and it's a developed city. And then you go into Juarez, and especially the deeper you go in, there's like buildings that have just collapsed and no one's doing anything with them. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it's like lane lines. Why do you need any lane paint? You just pick whatever lane you want. I mean, it's the same way in Nicaragua, right? I mean, it's like everything's a suggestion out there.
Especially row order is completely a total suggestion.
Yeah.
And you just ride and drive however you want, and the stoplight's a suggestion for you to pause or not.
Yeah. Have you been to London at all?
Yes.
Okay, because for me, I thought London was one of the dirtiest developed cities I've ever been in. I like to walk neighborhoods when I travel. And so I was just walking neighborhood after neighborhood, not just touristy stuff, like not just going to Big Ben and all that kind of stuff, like walking all over. And so often I'd walk by something and like they have those stoops, it's like you pass a stoop and the other end, there's just like piles of garbage.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this is the UK. Why am I finding piles of garbage as I'm walking down neighborhoods? And some of like the lower floors where they've got a window with like a little cubby hole thing cut out in the ground so some light still gets into those bottom floors, people would fill those things with garbage.
And it never gets cleaned out.
No. And I'm like, so whoever has that window down there, whenever you look out the window, all you're seeing is garbage lined up against your window. Right? So that was the most shocking place I've ever been as far as dirty cities. Not that it's the only dirty city I've been to, but it was just kind of the most stark. So I couldn't imagine going somewhere where it's even worse than that. Luckily, knock on wood, I've never been anywhere where garbage was blown across the road.
Yeah, Peru is pretty bad. They're known for the lack of like eco-friendliness. And then like you kind of ride through these places and you're like, yeah, I want to save the ocean. And you go down there, you're like, well, where are these trashes that these people are throwing down here going? Well, they're going to end up coming here too. It's the ocean.
Yeah.
Is this going to be blown all over the place? And you can do all the preservation here and all that trash is like they're not doing anything there, so it's just going to come all the way over to us anyways. It's quite terrifying. I mean, in Mexico, I don't know if you have the experience in like Tijuana, the trash is terrible too.
No, so I haven't been to Tijuana. I used to live in California, but I've never actually gone down to Tijuana. I've done a Rocky Point, it's called out here. It's 2 or 3 hours to the beach from Phoenix, Arizona. And I've done Juarez a few times. But other than that, those are my typical Mexico experiences because number one, Rocky Point's close to Arizona.
Uh-huh.
And my girlfriend's family, a bunch of them are in Juarez. So typically if we go to Mexico, we're going to one of those two places. So, and they're both fairly close to the border, but not Tijuana.
Tijuana is rough. I stayed there for a week, and it was. I think I was very lucky that my bike didn't get touched. Every time I left, I put a lock on it. I put a cover on it. I put 2 locks on it. I have the what's it called? The rotor lock, and then I have a cable lock as well. I tie the wheels together, and I lock the rotor, and I put the cover on it.
Oh, good. I mean, that's the best you can do, right? I mean,
Yeah, exactly. You make it really inconvenient for other people. It's just
yeah. I mean, if they're dead set on your bike, they're going to get it. But a lot of times, at least in the U.S., they talk about most theft is crime of opportunity.
yes,
So they're looking for the easiest target that's going to make them the most money as fast as possible.
right.
So yeah.
If they have a really high chance of getting caught, that's very dangerous because Grand Theft Auto and all. So you actually go to prison for it. So they typically look for things that you can grab real quick, and the chance of getting caught is very low. So,
Well, I'm glad you had a good experience, or at least the least bad experience you could have.
yeah. It really wasn't bad. I mean, there was a lot of there's a lot of things that you really can't like plan along the way. You just kind of just wing it. But those are some of the most fun and the most exciting. Yeah.
So now we've talked about your sort of favorite place to ride and your favorite place to sort of hang out. What would be your least favorite place? If you could skip that country the next time you did this, if you do it again, which country would that be?
Skip the country?
Like if you could just be like, I don't ever want to go there again. If I could just skip it, I'll do it.
See, interesting enough, it'll probably be Costa Rica and Panama.
Yeah? Even Panama?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
I mean, it's just it wasn't very raw for me. Like it wasn't like the motorcycling experience. It's great to go to the port and then go from Panama to Colombia. I think it was absolutely gorgeous. Riding the sailboat across, and I would love to do that again. But as far as like the riding experience, I find it to be kind of meh. A lot of the countries like Guatemala and like El Salvador, like they have fantastic riding, and it's really, really undeveloped and really sketchy in a whole lot of places. And those places were absolutely amazing. So if I were to go back, the idea is I want to explore and go out and see these places. So I would not, if I could like skip Costa Rica and then blast through Panama and get on the stall ride, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And of course, like the other big place that I really didn't, the other place that I really didn't really enjoy the ride. I wouldn't say I didn't really enjoy the ride, but it was very long, was cutting across Canada. That was like, you thought the plains in the US were bad. Wow. When you get to the Canadian plains, the map does not do itself justice. Like you are on there forever. Like it seems like the you just keep riding and then like hours and hours and hours and hours, and then like you stop and you do that for a whole week and you're like, whoa, I'm still not in Alaska yet.
Wow.
Like, and I'm clocking like maybe like sometimes 500, sometimes like most of the time about 450 miles riding all day because there's not much around. And some days I do 600, some days I do 500 on a dual sport. I mean, that was rough, but um, and it's like you do that for day in and day out, day in and day out, day in and day out, and like I'm still not there yet. Like, what the heck am I doing? But man, there's some really beautiful sceneries up there though. So I wouldn't say that would be the worst for me. I would still think like Costa Rica and Panama would be the ones I would skip.
Well, at the bare minimum, at least Panama is small.
Yes, both of them are very small actually, cutting across. But both of them were not that exciting. I mean, they were exciting when I was there. But if I think about it, like I don't know what else I would go back for.
Yeah, but in comparison, right now that you've done the whole trip and you've got so much more to relate it to, it's got to be different. I mean, yeah,
exactly.
I get it. Yeah. So let's go back in time a little bit. How did you first start riding? What got you into bikes?
So I've always said that I don't want to ride a motorcycle. It's too dangerous.
Me too.
Always. We had that in common. Very cool. And so there's my ex-girlfriend of like, we were together for 6 years. And she was always like super curious of everything. And then she always wanted to like ride motorcycles or do something like that. And I was like, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. I mean, there was also a bit of a protective thing with me too, because she was kind of like, spacey, and I was like, yo, that's just a recipe for disaster. Like, she's not like focus, and I was like, that's just a recipe for disaster. You veer away 1 second, and next thing you're off the road. So like there was a bit of like protectiveness from me too. So I had like this like resistance to tell her no. So after we split up, I was like, well, let me try it.
So she put the bug in your head and
yes.
You said, no. Then as soon as she was gone, you were like, okay, maybe I will actually hop on.
Exactly.
Okay.
So then I started. Actually, I had a great mentor. He's a friend of mine, and the reason why like she wanted to do motorcycling is because we're friends. We were friends with my motorcycle mentor, and he lives like 2 blocks down the road from me. And I will always see him normally, and we chit chat, and he's always on his bike. So when I wanted to start motorcycling, I asked him if he could teach me, and that was probably the most useful and relevant experience for me, like as far as like staying with motorcycling and as far as like learning to travel on bikes and everything, because I see so many people coming out of like MSF course, and they buy their bike and they're like, okay, where do I go?
Mm-hmm.
And then they ride to their Starbucks, or they ride to wherever they're going to go, like short distance trip. And, they never progress more than that. And over the years, with enough, very, very little riding, oftentimes the bike just sits there, and then eventually they sell it or something similar to that extent. And then that kind of story is very prevalent. And so my mentor did 3,000 miles with me. So I wasn't allowed to ride by myself. I had to ride with him for the first 3,000 miles. I got an old 83 R80 RT, and I took the fairings off because the fairing looked ugly. And I did 3,000 miles on that bike, and then I sold it right afterwards, and I regret it ever since. And then I got that bike, the 2001 R1100S, and then I started riding that, and then I did my cross country trip on that. But it was a progression. It was like, we do 20, 30 miles, and then we do 40, 50 miles, and then we do 100 miles, and then we do 200, 300 miles, and then we rode down the Dios Gap and back. And then I've been down to Deals Gap almost every year with different bikes. It's relatively close. It's only like 650 miles from here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's relatively close. An easy 2-day riding casually, you'll get there. So it's not exactly like you got a long weekend, you can make it there and back. So
Sure.
and if you take 81, you can blast it back in one day if you really wanted to. But that's how I got introduced into riding, and it's everything from how often you should stop and how to look for places to stop, how to watch out for things on the road, and how to prepare your mind for that kind of journey, and how to enjoy yourself on the road. And like all these little things really really like made my motorcycling experience like that much more um, valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So have you ever taken any formal courses, or you pretty much just rely on your mentor right now? Or
Actually, he hasn't been teaching me for a long time. I mean, like after that first 2 to 3 years, I've been riding on my own quite a bit, and then of course I took my trip and whatnot. Um, but the only formal course I did was the MSF course, and you also learn from videos and whatnot. But I haven't gone to other courses where like you pay to learn particular skills.
yeah, I just started riding in 2019 for the first time. My buddy taught me in Nicaragua. He had this little like 125cc Skylar, he said it was, and it was kickstart, and he just like I've driven a stick shift car before, right? So the whole changing gears thing wasn't anything new. So once he explained it, I was kind of ripping around this field right next to the house we were staying at for a while, and I was just in love. I mean, I was like you. I always said I'm never riding a bike that's way too dangerous, because I'll do something dangerous as long as the corresponding fun outweighs it. It's always a scale in my mind. It's like if it's really fun and also really dangerous, I might give it a try if I can find some way to mitigate the
Yeah.
danger. Right. In
Right.
my mind, motorcycles always, it's like, they look cool, but I don't want to get squished by a car. So I think I'll just keep my stupidity shield around me and drive my truck. Um, but yeah, the whole Nicaragua thing, like getting on a bike for the first time had me hooked. And in any case, flash forward, I was thinking about buying a bike the whole time I got back and saying, no, you don't need a bike. It's a waste of money, but it's going to be so much fun, but it's a waste of money because I do accounting as my day job. And so I'm always thinking about money. And I was like, you can afford a bike. I'm like, no, I shouldn't get a bike. Anyway, ended up wanting to get a bike. So I took the MSF course, and it was amazing to me how many people had been riding daily that came into this course, and we're still struggling with these low speed drills. Now,
Yeah.
granted, like they can ride, right? They're not, not going to probably die going to and from Starbucks because they've been doing it for years. Like one guy even commuted to work all the time on his bike. But it's amazing to see people and how the skills that you don't practice never develop, right? So things like emergency braking. These folks are on the road all the time, and their emergency braking is way longer than it should be, right?
Yeah. So you kind of adapt other ways around your shortcomings, and then you kind of get into these bad habits that you do. Yes.
Yeah. So for me, it was like, I'm glad I started with the MSF because what I do now basically is every time I ride my bike, because I just got my bike in April of 2020. And so
Mm-hmm.
every time I go out now, I do some low speed stuff either before my ride or after my ride. So it's like I'm constantly building practice, and one of the things I like to practice a lot is the emergency braking, because again, watching all these guys and girls who've been riding daily riding and we're having trouble with emergency braking was telling me this doesn't come natural just because you're riding the bike a lot, unless you're practicing braking suddenly, it doesn't mean you're going to be good. So yeah, that's kind of now I'm all about it. I got this Moto Jitsu book, like you see my hat here.
Yeah.
I bought the Moto Jitsu book, and they've got all these drills, and I bought cones, and there's like a little measuring stick, and I get everything set up, and I go and I practice.
And you practice, yes.
Yeah, because it's like, this guy here, his nickname's Fast Eddie, who does these courses, and he was like, you can always upgrade the hardware, but it's not going to make you a better rider. But
Correct.
upgrading your software will make you a better rider on any hardware that you're on.
Yeah, those low speed maneuvers and whatnot, it doesn't come up until it comes up. And if you don't have regular practice where you have muscle memory, that's when you get into trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's invaluable to continuously practice. Yeah.
No. And I'm an overly cautious kind of guy, and like I said, like I'm willing to take risks as long as I can find some way to mitigate them. And I feel like practicing is a way to mitigate the risks.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a very good philosophy. I'm a very I take a lot of risk, obviously.
I see. Yeah.
As long as I feel like it's going to make my life more fulfilling or more interesting or different, I'm game for it.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter how dangerous it is, as long as I know that probably I won't like get like severely injured if I be careful, and then also at the same time that it will also enrich my life in a way that I have not, or have a different perspective or view on things that I have not had before. And if those things are aligned, then I'm good.
That's a great philosophy too. I think life's short, So I've seen on your blog, it looks like you've done a lot of writing here in the U.S. Have you done any writing over in Europe or Asia or Australia or anywhere outside sort of North and South America?
No, so I have not, and that's my next big trip I want to do is from London to Beijing, and I want to go through all those countries as well. I've visited most of, let me see, I visited most of the European countries though. I've been to the UK, I've been to France, Spain, Germany, Italy, Austria, Poland, and and these little countries in here I can't remember name, and I've been to Netherlands and whatnot. So I've been to most of Western Europe, and I can't wait to go out there and like have a bike so I can ride. I was born in Taiwan, and I've been to China as well. So I want to ride, in China as well. But these are all like dreams. It has to happen. And I got a buddy in Australia as well. So I really want to go there and ride over there as well.
Yeah. I just saw a video of a guy riding in Australia, and there was a gigantic spider floating or something, and it smacked him right in the face, crawled down like this, and he was like hopping off his bike trying to get this giant spider off of him, and he was like, "Welcome to riding in Australia."
That maybe I'll pass. I have all kinds of allergies, man. So I actually got stung by 2 yellow jackets on my trip, and I actually got stung by a yellow jacket several years ahead as well, and it flew into my sleeve while I'm riding. So then you try to get rid of it, and then it stings you, obviously, and then you hurriedly move over, try to not drop your bike because you're in a lot of pain. And then so that sting swelled up to about the size of my fist.
Oh.
And then it kind of went away after about a week. And then another week went by and it went down a little bit more. And then I had a full body reaction. Like I had to get steroids for 2 weeks.
Wow.
So on the road, I got stung twice by yellow jacket, once up in Canada, and then another time in Colombia. And I learned that you take the baking soda and you cauterize the wound with the baking soda right away, and it'll burn and it'll pull the venom out.
Wow.
of your skin, and it'll burn your skin a little bit, but at least I didn't have any generalized reaction afterwards. I didn't have any reactions to it, but I mean, having a full body reaction needing steroids, it's rough.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah.
The good thing you didn't have that happen on such a long trip. That would have been even more miserable.
Oh yeah, that would have been. I mean, actually, in South America, it might not be because you can buy steroids and basically
Oh,
you can not like you can buy the hydrocortisone steroid like very easily in any of the pharmacies for allergic reactions. Here, you need like all kinds of prescriptions and like get checked like 5 times by doctors and they write you something. Down there, you just go and you're like, oh, I have an allergic reaction. I want some steroids.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you were born in Taiwan. When did you come to the U.S.?
I went to Brazil first,
Oh, okay.
and then stayed there for 2 years, and then came to the U.S. when I was 9.
Okay, so you probably don't have as much of an impression of what the process was like to immigrate into the U.S. as your parents might have. Did your parents come with you, or?
Yeah.
Okay, I figured.
Yeah. So immigration process. I mean, yes and no. I think that I beaten this horse to death with my novel that I wrote. It's about my immigration experience.
That was coming up next.
So the novel is about my immigration experience and growing up in the States.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think my experience would be dramatically different if I was like in California or out west. But like DC area was at least at the time it was when I in the Maryland area at the time, like the Asian population is very 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 low. I think the school that I went to at the time had like the high school had like 2 or 3 Asians. Like,
so why Maryland then and not Northern Virginia? Because at least when I was living in Northern Virginia, there's a huge Asian population out there.
Right, exactly. Right. I don't know.
Okay. Wow.
Like we were in Maryland, and there was in the places that we were living, it was just the population density was very low. There was areas where there was more Asian population, but we didn't live in that area. Mm-hmm. So there was other places in Maryland that had a little more density, but we weren't very close to it. And yeah. But now it's like super diverse here. I mean, I'm working in the same school system that I graduated from. Mm-hmm. But now it's like very, very diverse.
That's good. I loved DC. The thing I loved about DC the most was how much diversity there was, because with diversity comes a lot of different things, right? I mean, there comes a lot of good restaurants, a lot of interesting people and stories. And the people that you're working with, I think the vibe is different when there's a lot of different types of people around. It seems like I just seem to run better. Like when I worked at Booz Allen, it's probably still to this day my favorite place that I've ever worked. And part of it was just the people were so great to work with. And yeah, everything was just, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but if you move out to somewhere like Arizona, the diversity is much less. I mean, when my ex-wife and I first moved here, we stopped at this mall and we walked into the mall and we really stopped and paused and looked around, and we just were shocked because it was just a sea of white people. And we'd lived out in DC, I think 6 to 8 years, something like that. And so we'd gotten used to the fact that you walk in places and there, especially big crowded places, there's always just a sea of different people. And to come to Arizona, walk into this mall and just be like, what, where did we go? And I don't know. That's the one. I love the weather here in Arizona. I mean, the heat kind of sucks for a couple months, but the weather's fantastic. You're driving distance to the ocean, you're driving distance to mountains and snow. I mean, basically anything you could want is just 3 to 6 hours away.
Grand Canyon.
Grand Canyon, yeah, that's not. Yeah. I think it's ugly, but a lot of people like it.
I like Canyonlands better.
See, I like the Painted Desert better. Yeah, it's just
I've never
more
been.
interesting.
Never been.
It's the picture of the Grand Canyon, they make it seem so vivid, right? Yeah. And it's all Photoshop. Like you get there and it's always hazy, and so all the colors look really muted and stuff, and it just looks like a big hole. But you go to the Painted Desert and you actually get to walk through these like hills of different color, and you can see the layers of color, and it's so bright and saturated, all around you. To me, that's way better than the Grand Canyon. Plus, the Grand Canyon gets so packed with people in non-COVID times. But anyway, yes.
Another point of interest for me. Added to my my map.
It's nice. It's kind of small, especially compared to the Grand Canyon, obviously, right? But if it's already on your route, or if it's not too much outside of the route that you're trying to take through Arizona, it's, in my mind, one of the things worth it to see.
Cool.
Horseshoe Bend is another one that's
that's right.
Right? It's like there's nothing but Horseshoe Bend to see, right? So you get out there, you go, you look, you're like, oh, it's Horseshoe Bend, and then you have to go around and go back to your car because there's nothing else there.
That's it?
Nothing else. There's nothing else to see. It's just like all desert. The same desert you've been driving through to get there. It's like that's all it is. Just like and at least when I went, they didn't have a really good path to get up there. So you're like, you start off in the parking lot and then you're almost immediately climbing this hill of sand. And so your shoes are starting to fill with sand as you go up, and then you get to the crest and it kind of like levels out and you get some more firm ground. And you get over to the edge and it's more rocky. And then you look over and you're like, oh, sweet. That's a river that turns. And then you turn around and go back. Like that's it.
Wow.
Yeah. Arizona's still fun though, I think, if you've never been before.
I've been a long time ago, back in when I was a little kid. My dad and my mom and my brother, we did a cross country trip in a station wagon.
Did you guys stop by Sedona?
No, we only stopped by the Grand Canyon and we went north.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, look, the Grand Canyon is a must-see. If you've never seen it before, you got to see it.
I've seen it. I really didn't like it as much as Canyonland. I like Canyonland. I don't know if you've been to Canyonland. It's in Utah.
Haven't been to Canyonland, no.
So it's Canyonland, and there's like White Rims Trail. You can ride your motorcycle in the valley. Wow. And you can camp out there. It's really cool. So it's one of the things I wanted to do. I didn't get to do it when I saw it that one time. I actually saw people driving down on the trail. Because you can overlook all the canyons, and you see people driving inside a canyon.
Wow.
It's really cool. Yeah. It's like a 100-mile loop. You can camp in there too.
100-mile loop. Wow.
So
that's cool.
Yeah. So I've been wanting to move out west for a while.
What states are you looking at?
Huh?
What states are you looking at to move to?
Basically the cluster: New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, and Arizona.
Okay.
And that's the cluster. I don't want to go to Cali because there's too many. I want to be able to access it, but it's too expensive. Too expensive, and the emission laws are ridiculous too. So you can't do anything to your vehicles. Like
can't touch it.
Yeah, and then you have all these like extra canisters sitting in. No.
Yeah. I like Colorado. I've not done a lot of exploring in Colorado, but I've been out to Denver and kind of the Denver metropolitan area, and I thought it was kind of nice, but I don't know. I think I hate winter. I hate snow. It's like I like to visit snow or see it in pictures, but I don't want to live in it. Yeah, yeah. So for me, that's why when I was looking for a place to go, and if you're looking for places that don't have natural disasters either, you're pretty much limited to Arizona. If you don't want winter and you don't want natural disasters, Arizona is basically your only option. But you have to be able to handle 120 degrees in the summer. So,
yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
It's dry heat. It's not that bad.
Dry heat makes a difference until about 105. And then once you're over 105, it doesn't matter. It's still hot. When you roll down your window and you get a blast of like oven heat, that's just miserable. I don't care where you're at.
Fair enough.
And we also have monsoon season. So during monsoon season, we get a lot of moisture and we get the humidity and the heat.
Oh, that's terrible. But I'll take heat over freezing any day.
Oh yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
If I'm freezing, I feel like they just don't work. I just feel like rolling up, crawling up in bed, and just not leaving.
Well, and I've never been that much of a morning person. And so when I lived out in DC, I was living in this one apartment in Alexandria in particular, and we were in a cul-de-sac. But our cul-de-sac came right up against one of the main snow routes. And so they would plow us in
Oh yeah, I've seen that
every
before.
single snowstorm. So we'd have to get up, and not only do I now have to dig my car out of the, I have to get up early, right? Even more early than usual. Dig my car out. And then me and some other neighbors have to dig a route to the road. And then we've got to deal with this gigantic pile of snow that just blocked
Or
our way
ice,
in.
because now
Or
they
ice.
packed it all in for
Exactly. And
you.
we're like working together trying to smash this thing apart so we can get our cars out and go to work. And to me, that was it. I was like, I am done with snow.
It doesn't snow here anymore.
Really?
Not in the last 4 or 5 years. Like the worst we got was like an inch or two.
Of course. I've left.
It really doesn't snow here anymore. And I'm kind of somewhat disappointed because I usually go like snowboarding once a year when the snowstorm is imminent, and then I know the school's going to close, and I leave before it hits, so I know the next day I'm not going to have work.
Nice.
So then I go snowboarding for like a day or two, and it doesn't do that anymore. I haven't gone in like several years because there's no snowstorm here anymore.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's gotten really warm over the for the winters now.
Well, too late now. I already moved. Obviously Maryland and Virginia are going to be a little bit different, but it was never like super snowy, but we always, at least 5-6 times a year, we would have a heavy snow where schools would shut down. You know what I mean? Definitely not as bad as Illinois. I used to live in Illinois too, and that was freaking horrible.
The snowstorms?
Oh yeah, and I used to be a paper boy out there. Wow. And I remember one year I got up super early in the morning to go deliver papers, and we were having kind of like almost a sleet storm, right? Uh-huh. And I had a ski mask on, and I'm walking my paper out. My mom is coming behind me too because it's so freaking cold out with the wind chill. And the ice is coming through my ski mask and like hitting me in the face hard enough to sting. And I'm out there, throwing these stupid papers, and we hit the end of the block, and I'd go warm up in my mom's car and then get out and go do the other side of the block and then get back in and try to warm up for a minute. It was, yeah.
Oh, wow. Sounds terrible.
Oh yeah, my snow experiences have not been good. Like I don't have those experiences that some kids have where they're like, "Oh, we were in Aspen snowboarding, and then my parents flew us to Switzerland and we were skiing in the Alps." Right? Mine is like my dad sent us outside to shovel snow, and I'm like, "But Dad, it's still snowing." And he's like, "Then you'll shovel it again in an hour." Yeah.
Yep. Sounds familiar.
So you mentioned that you are a school counselor.
Yeah.
Or at least you were. I don't know if you still are or not.
I still am. I work in high school now.
Okay. I was looking at your resume. It looks like you originally went to school for
marketing and logistics.
Yeah, logistics. So my girlfriend does logistics now. So I was really interested to see you went in and took logistics as part of your course of study. But how did you end up going from logistics and marketing into counseling?
Well, I graduated and I worked for Johnson & Johnson healthcare system. I sat in a cubicle, and the most exciting thing, I sat in a cubicle in Piscataway, New Jersey.
Everyone loves Jersey. Come on.
It's just outside of the New York border. And the most excitement I get was going to the warehouse maybe once a month. Beyond that is the TPS reports and, no, literally. So that was like 2004, 2005 at that time. And Office Space just came out, not too many. Office Space was what, a 2001 or 2002 movie?
I thought it was 2001, but I don't know.
Yeah. and it just came out. And then I watched this movie when I was up in New Jersey and work, and I was like, this is my life. Holy crap. I literally had 3 bosses came by and asked me about the same thing. Like, and I was sitting in my cubicle and I'm like, oh my God, I gotta get out. Like this is crazy. Like I can't do this. So I came back and I sold some real estate in the time in between, and then the market crashed, and I went back to school, got my master's in counseling, and you know, and then right after I graduated, I got my job in the county, and then I've been here since.
I think it's saying something when you will choose to deal with middle school and high school children rather than sit in a cubicle. Because to me, like I'm not much of a kid person. Like I like my niece, but anyone else's kids, I don't have the patience for it, you know. So
Yeah.
I would probably choose a cubicle over children. But you went the opposite route, huh?
I chose the interaction, really. I chose the interaction. I wouldn't say I choose I mean, I really love working with the kids, but you know, it takes a lot out of me working with a lot of these kids. So I wouldn't say that it's like, oh, hey, working with kids and like being patient is so great. It does take a lot out of you, but I think the interaction and the watching people like being able to change their cards like is really fulfilling in many ways. But the pay is really terrible as well. So
Yeah, but if they're going to pay you poorly, they can at least give you a year off every 4 years to go do what you want.
exactly. To ride my bike around the world. Exactly. So that, and the insurance are good. So like, you stay there for 4 years, you go tour around the world for a year, and then you come back.
Yeah.
Business as usual.
So how long do you have? 2 more years until your next 4 year period is up, or is it less?
No, 3 more years. So
3 more years,
including this year, because I did my trip 2 years ago. I know there was a year, and then I did a year of work, and then this year will be my second year, and I have 2 more years to do if I want to take another trip. But I'm honestly thinking about just finding a comparable counseling job out west and move, because
wow.
I've always wanted. I love I love Utah, the Rockies. Like it's just so beautiful out there. It really is like God's country. Like it's like eye porn everywhere. Like everywhere you go, like the mountains and it's just so beautiful.
I just can't deal with the regulations of Utah.
That's fair enough.
So my current company, we've got our second largest office is in Salt Lake, and I've had to go out there occasionally for things. And I remember the first time I went, and we were in a restaurant, and I don't know if you drink or not, but I drink some, not a lot, but I drink. And I'd ordered an old fashioned, and the waitress was like, "Do you want 1 ounce or 2 ounces?" And I'm like, "I don't know what you mean. Just an old fashioned's got 1.5 ounces typically. Can't you just make it like a normal old fashioned?" And she was like, "No, they have to be served in either these little bottles that are measured and like airplane bottles, or they have these like special dispensers, I guess, that get like almost audited by the state to make sure that they dispense only 1 ounce exactly."
What the heck?
So yeah, and then I was talking to this girl who was driving Uber because I was going to a cigar shop out there, and I didn't want to drive the rental car that the rest of my coworkers were going to be riding in too.
Yeah.
So I was talking to her, and I was like, "Oh, if you're a bartender, why are you Ubering?" And she's like, "I couldn't take it anymore. Like, it's such a pain in the ass to bartend out here in Utah, that you don't get to make that much money either, because it's just they make it so difficult to drink." So anyway, it's not the only thing, but that was just the most striking part of the whole situation.
That's pretty extreme.
I'm like, man, it's like you step back in time and suddenly, you're back in the 50s when you can't open on Sundays, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it is beautiful.
I don't drink much. Haven't drank much at all when I came back. I used to drink wine all the time, but not anymore.
I find myself going through phases.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes I'll be like, oh, you know what? I really am enjoying these old fashions, and I'll have old fashions for like a month, where it's like almost every night I'll come home and have an old fashioned, and then I'll just get tired of like spending the money and making the drinks, and then just go back to like my, uh, you know, this is San Pellegrino, and then I won't drink for another 6 months or so, like except on occasion, and then get into another hankering where it's like I'll discover a new Scotch. Like when I first started drinking Lafroig, I was just in love because it's got this like really smoky flavor, and I love smoky Scotch. And I was buying just like bottle after bottle of that stuff, and I probably went through 2 bottles a month, which for me is a lot. But anyway, Utah is beautiful. I just I don't like nanny states. That's why I don't want to live in California.
That's fair.
Yeah,
it's fair. Yeah. So California, the same thing.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to live in California either.
I think California have more restriction on my hobbies than Utah. So I'm not paying attention to those restrictions. That doesn't really impact me. But
yeah,
definitely you hit California, you already know it's like
And it's sad because there's so much to do, and there's so much awesome stuff in California. But the regulations for me just ruin it. I would never want to own a house there. I mean, between the taxes and the fact that you can't touch your bike at all.
Yeah.
Pretty
much. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have one other thing I really wanted to get to before we get too far off track, because when I was reading it, I really liked it. So I have this quote here, and it was, "The only meaningful relationships are built on generosity." And I saw that on your website, and I was wondering if you could talk about, is that something that came from your father, or is that something that you've been thinking about over years growing up, or how do you think that came about?
I think it's mainly from my own personal experiences. Like when you give and when you provide, that those kind of things go much further than other kind of interactions. And if you're the one that provides and you're the one that give, that likewise when you receive that from others, you find that connection to be very strong. When people are being very generous with you and taking care of you or doing stuff for you, that connection is so strong. Like especially on my trip, with so many times, like a couch surf. But typically with couch surfing, you go there and you hang out, socialize with the person, and they show you around. But actually, one of my most meaningful interactions with, I met a guy on the overpass in California on Highway 1 coming down. And this guy was riding I want to say it was a Goldwing. I don't remember very well the exact bike, but I think he was riding a Goldwing. And he's like, "Hey, I live in SoCal," and we started chatting on the overlook. And then he's like, "Hey, come on down when you're in Southern California, hit me up, and I'll take you out surfing."
Wow.
So when I got down to Southern California, and I was like, "Oh, whatever, might as well." I just messed with this guy, and he's like, "Oh yeah, come out this time. We'll meet up." It was like middle of the night because he ended up working night shift, and it was middle of the night, and it was really, really late. I want to say it was like 10 o'clock. And he's like, "Oh yeah, just ride with me." So we rode late at night through all like around Southern California, and then he took me over to his parents had a house like on the beach, so we went over there and stayed there. And the next day, he took me out with the board and showed me how to surf.
Wow.
and then like bought me breakfast, chit chatted about my trip, and it was funny because like I was trying to pay for the breakfast because I was like, man, this guy's like being like so generous with me, like, teaching me how to surf and doing all this stuff for me and giving me a place to stay and whatnot. And I was trying to pay, and then he was like, no, this is, and then he said the oddest thing, but it always stuck with me. He's like, no, 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 no. This is from me to you, and that's it. I was like, okay, interesting. But it was so cool because I still keep in touch with him. We still definitely chat, but it was one of the most interesting experience I had, which kind of like made me somewhat excited and motivated when I got down to El Salvador. I stayed at a surf camp for like a week
Wow.
because now I was like, oh man, I really good because you wake up at like 6:30, you go out there and then you're like in the water and then you do this whole morning thing and you eat your breakfast. Man, that sensation is out of this world. Like you feel so alive. Um, I mean, I'm terrible at surfing, but man, just that, just going out there and then doing it. But those kind of like generosity that people provide you are like some of the most meaningful, and then it it makes you just as generous, want to give back to others, and you believe in like the best in people. You believe like there are people with like-minded attitudes in this world that you can share these life things with them, and I've been doing my share of helping my friends with their bikes and whatnot, and giving back, and it's just a meaningful experience. When people give, you want to feel like you want to give back more, and that reciprocation becomes a very strong relationship.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's always interesting to have a thought or an idea, and then it becomes totally different when you sort of experience it, right? I mean, it's like as much as you think that you can understand something by considering it and pondering it or whatever. I think experience is just it can't be substituted. No amount of theory can really substitute for actually experiencing
Right.
things like that generosity, right? And the fact that it actually sparked a desire and you almost like planted a seed of generosity in you shows how much effect real experiences can have versus, no matter how much anyone thinks that they're like a philosopher or whatever, like you
Right.
got to
Right.
get out there and experience things to really understand them.
Right. It
So
changes you.
yeah,
But I also I feel I understand the power of just like coming back, settling down. Like it's definitely a total different mindset, and I really like myself a whole lot more when I was on the road than I am when I'm here. You know,
yeah.
because you kind of settle back down to your old ways in a way. Everything becomes routine, and when you're on the road, you grow. And I really miss that.
I feel like a lot of things in life are use it or lose it, like low speed skills. Just because I learn low speed skills, if I take 2 years and never practice them again, am I still going to be able to do those low speed skills 2 years from now at the same efficiency that I could before? No, right? I think generosity and, um, you know, patience, all these different things that people try to develop in themselves. Um, Once you think you've reached the end and you stop practicing, it starts to go away.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's been my experience
Right,
too.
right, right.
Like
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree.
wow. Well, I'm
Yeah.
excited. I can't wait to see more of your trips. Hopefully, you plan something. And first of all, I hope that you update your blog so I can see the rest of the trip because you left us on a cliffhanger where it was like, you're getting good, and then it's like you stopped. And I was like, I want the rest. I want the rest of the story. Now, luckily, I got to talk to you, right? But I'm also a photo person. I love photos, so I'm looking forward to seeing the pictures from
No,
that
thank you.
trip.
I will get around editing the content and posting them soon enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I
Okay.
gotta call the girlfriend. She's still in Colombia, so
Is she?
yeah.
Wow, that's good. Now, is she Colombian or is she
She's
just in
Colombian.
Colombia? Oh, okay.
So I met her on the road. So I got to Colombia. She was one of my hosts, and then we got along. She showed me around for like 3 days, and we got along real well. And then I was like, hey, oh, she doesn't speak a lick of English, and
So you speak Spanish?
I didn't speak a lick of Spanish. But we got along real well. Like we went out to do all this outdoor stuff, and then we had a lot of fun. I mean, like I use Google Translate, so then like we can at least like somewhat communicate.
So are you learning to speak Spanish now, I assume? Or
yeah. I mean, like now I can speak to her in Spanish, more or less. It's been like a year and a half, so I can speak enough to communicate with her now. So then I just after 3 days, I was like, hey, you want to go with me all the way down to Argentina and the bottom of South America? She's like, I gotta quit my job. Okay.
Wow.
It's like just got up and left, and then we just took off. We did a little bit of time in Colombia first. It was a little rough in the beginning. You've never been on a road trip with another person, and you don't really communicate that well, and then like there's bound to be conflict initially, and there's like cultural and other issues that are conflicting, and then we did about a 2-week test. It was good, and we kept going.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow. So has she ever had a chance to come out to the U.S.? I mean, I'm going to assume not because of the time frames and then COVID.
And also, with COVID, and also with they're really tight on giving visas.
Yeah.
In general, to Colombians, in general, I remember when I came back from Colombia, just on the regular flight to Florida, you get out of the plane, they make you line up one at a time. And then they take the sniffer dog and then they sniff each and every single person before you can keep walking out the gate. And I'm like, yo, is that serious? Apparently it is.
Okay. I mean, assume it's cocaine they're looking for?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Apparently it's that serious.
Wow.
Yeah. Every passenger gets to walk out in the line, they sniff you, and then you can move on. And
they do that actually coming back from Nicaragua.
Too?
Yeah, but they do it a little bit differently. So you're in the customs line, right?
Yeah.
Well, then they have this big gap, and the two people go at a time, and they walk the dog between you guys. Okay, so you're in the big, long, snaking custom line, then they have a section off where you have to like wait here, and then there's like an opening over here, and they'll say go, and then the two of you walk, and they come with this bond sniffing dog, and they kind of like walk with you, and then they come back over here, or not.
Which airport is this?
I don't remember if this is on the U.S. side. I don't remember if this was in Atlanta. I think it was in Atlanta. I think I flew back into Atlanta.
I was in Orlando. Like literally right when you come before you even leave the plane, they'll sniff you first before you can depart into the airport.
Wow. Yeah. See, ours was on the way to customs. Like you're already lined up for the customs line. And then they just have, like I said, a little sectioned off area where they just bring you through two by two, and they walk that drug sniffing dog right next to you. And he's like, actually, I get held up in customs all the time.
Really?
All the time. I get randomly selected.
Really?
Yeah. Going to Paris, I got randomly selected, I think twice, for like extra screening. And coming back from Nicaragua, I was bringing cigars, which Nicaragua, like a huge chunk of their economy is cigars, and most of their tourism is cigar tourism, right? Yeah. So it's not new that I'm coming back from Nicaragua and I'm going to have some cigars. And so I bought a bunch of cigars. I mean, I tried to stay under the limit, you know what I mean? And but I bought a bunch of cigars while I was in Nicaragua. And I told them, they're like, anything in your bag? I'm like, yeah, I bought some cigars. How many? And I don't remember how many it was. It was like 80 or something, it was, or 50 or whatever, like 2 bundles. And I think, oh, well, you're gonna have to go to this other place for extra screening or whatever. And so they send me this other line, and I'm not allowed, like, they make me pull my bag off and then bring my bag down there. And then like some other area you couldn't touch your bag. And it was just crazy, like all this extra screening. And then I finally get to the customs officer down at the extra screening, and he's like, okay, so why'd they send you? And I was like, well, I've got cigars. And he's like, oh, Jesus. And then just like stamps it and sends me on my way. But yeah, the first customs officer was super grumpy with me. Like, what? You have how many cigars? And like, yeah, I was like, it's not that many, really, but okay, I guess. And I told him the law as I understood it. I was like, okay, as I understand, you're allowed to bring back X number of cigars, and I'm like 20 cigars under that limit, so I should be good.
Yeah.
He disagreed.
He's like, no, I caught you, so now it doesn't matter how many you have. I'm just gonna.
I declared it. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Silliness.
Yeah, but I love traveling though. Like even with all those different, annoyances or whatever, I love to travel. So I dream now of going to Norway to ride, because I was watching a YouTube video of this guy on his adventure bike riding these mountain roads in Norway, and there was this mist over the mountains and this like waterfall over here, and then all the stuff was green around. I was like, oh my God, I want to go ride a bike there.
And you're just like, oh man.
So that's my post-COVID goal, is to get up to Norway, rent a motorcycle, and go ride that same road that this dude was on. So what about you? Do you have any post-COVID plans? Maybe not around the world because you don't have that kind of time, but anything maybe shorter?
Yeah, I mean, I always like to go out west. That's like my default. And I would trailer out. I trailer out a few years. Trailering out has its benefits because you can get there in 2 days if you drive.
Yeah.
And you have more time out west than just going through the plains. So if anything, I would probably, I've always wanted to go to Big Bend in Texas, and I never actually visited Texas before, so that's one of the things I wanted to do. So that might be on my short list. And then, of course, the Beartooth Pass in Wyoming. Every time I come back from my cross-country trip or wherever I go, it just never happens.
That's a shame.
Something happens and it never happens, and I'm just like, oh man. So those are two giant lists on my short list to do: Wyoming, Beartooth Pass, and in Texas for Big Bend.
Wow.
So.
Well, that's awesome. Like I said, I can't wait to see the photos and stuff that you hopefully will keep your blog updated with. So I think at this point, I'm just going to say thanks for coming onto the podcast. I really do appreciate it. I love hearing about your trip. I definitely look forward to hearing more about your trips. And yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of The Modern Squid. If you'd like to follow more of his adventures, you can follow his website, www.breakthecycles.com, and break is spelled BRAKE. If you'd like to follow his Instagram, you can do that at breakthecycles. And again, BRAKE. As always, I'll have an episode page up on themodernsquid.com where you can find episode links and also other information. So thanks again, and have a good one.